Hello everyone and welcome to Time for a New Watch. I'm Jeff and today we're going to be looking at the Glycine Airman No. 1. This is the second release of the No. 1. The original didn't have any brushed surfaces or anything, and this one that came out in I think July or August 2018, it has some brushed surface. It has a lot of brushed surfaces. I think it looks better. But it came out in a couple of different versions. I think, wow, there's actually a lot if you combine all the possibilities. But basically, it came out in either a 36 or 40 millimeter case size, a black or a white dial, and a purist version or GMT. And I'll get to what purist and GMT mean soon for anyone who doesn't already know. So these are basically very similar to vintage Glycine Airman in that it's a very faithful reissue. This particular version here, I did mention there's a lot of different versions. This is the 36 millimeter case size, and it's the GMT version. So now is as good a time as any to explain the difference between a GMT and a purist. So a GMT has this GMT hand here. So you've got your regular hour hand, your minute hand, your second hand going around there, and then you have this GMT hand here down at the 10 o'clock on the dial. So this means that, and here's where it gets a little more confusing, this regular hour hand goes around once every 12 hours and the GMT hand goes around once every 24 hours. However, on a purist, you don't have the GMT hand, and your regular hour hand just goes around once every 24 hours. So you have a 24-hour watch. This is basically a 12-hour GMT. This one I have right here is basically a 12-hour GMT watch, like any regular GMT movement that you've ever seen before. But it has a 24-hour dial, which is consistent with the other one. So it can be a little confusing, and at first, on the GMT version I have, it's a little hard to tell the time. I had read a Hodinkee review of the original that said it was easier to throw the GMT into like your everyday rotation. But to be honest, I kind of had a little bit of difficulty reading the super crowded dial. And I don't know. That was just me, and you definitely get used to it. So, but if I had to go again, I probably would have tried the purist. So anyway, let's get on to the case size, dimensions, all the other great stuff about this watch. So this is the 36 millimeter version. That means it is pretty small, only 36 millimeters wide. It also wears really small. There's still, 36 millimeter watches out there these days. There's a lot of vintage 36 millimeter watches out there, but most of them don't have a bezel here. So the dial is even smaller than most, 36, 37 millimeter watches. So it wears a lot smaller than you'd think. But even so, I think I have a 7-inch wrist and I think it's fine. I've worn larger watches. This is definitely on the smaller side of anything I've owned, but I still don't think it looks very bad at all. So 36 millimeter case width, then we get to the, the profile size here, the thickness, and that's only 10.8 millimeters. It's a pretty thin watch, comparatively to a lot of other ones these days. Also notice the lugs here. They are angled down very nicely. This makes it hug your wrist well. The lugs don't float up above your wrist. Like, that's kind of one of my pet peeves. I really don't like that. Even though I wear an Oris Diver 65 every day now these days, and that also suffers from that same issue. So it's not like a super deal breaker for me, but I do prefer it when it has lugs that curve down a lot like this. Anyway, the lug to lug length here, that's about 46 millimeters. So it's a small watch, but the lug to lug is relatively long for it, I guess. And the lug width here is 20 millimeters. which is also kind of large for a 36 millimeter watch. So you can, if you have a lot of watches with 20 millimeter lugs, this is great because, they can all share straps. And that's something that's just really handy to have. So you don't have to buy a bunch of 18 millimeter straps for, your small watch. Let's see here. So next is the glass. This is just like the original. It's got acrylic glass. So what that means is it can scratch very easily, but if the scratch isn't deep, it can be polished out very easily as well. It's not like mineral glass where if you scratch it, that's it. You got to scratch in there forever, but it's not, very scratch resistant like sapphire. Next thing, the crowns. You've got 2 of them. Why do you have 2 crowns? I'm sure you're probably wondering and asking. So obviously this one is your winding crown, time setting, all that, and you obviously can set the date, and also the GMT hand moves in 1 hour increments, so you can set that relative to however you want to set it on the 24-hour dial. So you can track 1 time zone here with your regular hour and minute hands. You can track a 2nd time zone with the GMT hand on the dial, and you can track a 3rd one on the bezel here. So that's 3 time zones. Better than 1, I guess. Anyway, so yeah. First crown, normal crown. Winding is really quiet too. Check that out. It's got I think a Sellita SW330 movement, which is their GMT one, and it just winds really, really quietly. It's pretty amazing, although I guess, it's not a requirement for me. I don't really care, but yeah. Go focus. Thank you, camera god. Okay, no, he's not gonna focus. There it goes, nice. All right, now, this 2nd crown. This is where it gets a little interesting. So check out the bezel. Doesn't move. That's because this crown here locks the bezel. So I unscrew it, and I can move the bezel around to, whatever I want. I'll go and put 24 at the top, so it's just like the dial here. So you put that in. If I lined it up correctly, yeah, there you go. It locks the bezel in place so it doesn't get accidentally turned. So that's kind of the Glycine Airman's trademark, is to have that little bezel locking mechanism, which they've put on all of these Airman watches. And it's a very cool feature. It's their it's sort of their signature feature on these. It's very cool. I like it. I mean, yeah, if it doesn't have it, it's not an Airman, pretty much. I'm sure that's incorrect, and someone will correct me, or someone will come up with some example that I've never seen before. But yeah, it's important for a Glycine Airman to have that little detail. So next, the dial itself. The GMT and the Purist both have 24-hour markings around the bezel, even though, as I mentioned before, the hands here, if we ignore the GMT hand, it's basically a 12-hour watch. So in my case, since I'm not using it as a 24-hour watch, I find the dial to be kind of crowded. And the loom it's not great. It's serviceable, but it's no Seiko loom or anything. Now, yeah, this gets me to another point why I would have wanted to go with the Purist. If you notice the tail on the hour hand here, that's really, really handy. Because if you're looking over here and you say, oh gee, 20 o'clock, I mean, what even is that? If you follow back here, you can see, oh, that's 8 o'clock, because the tail is pointing to the other side of the dial, where you can kind of, guess what time it is more, or you can figure the time out more easily if you're not used to a 24-hour watch. I just thought that was kind of a useful feature that's kind of wasted on my GMT version here. But either way, you can get used to it. Another thing I didn't really like about it, which is just once again something to get used to, is the second hand doesn't have a tail, and that's something that it turns out I'm really used to having. Like if you just glanced at this watch, it takes you like a second or two to realize this is the GMT hand. Oh, okay, this hand is moving, that's the second hand, and okay, this hand has a tiny bit of lume in the center, that's the minute hand. Like, I'm sure it's just me, and I'm sure that I just haven't gotten used to it yet, but it's not as easy to tell the time at a glance for me with this watch. So that's obviously something that you could get used to though, and I'm sure that given time I could get used to that as well. So it's not really a knock against it or anything, it's just my experience with it, that's all. So how about the strap here? It's a very attractive strap, that's for sure. Nice Glycine signed buckle. The strap is also Glycine branded here. It is awfully small though, awfully thin and cheap feeling. Like, it really feels cheap. I was afraid I was gonna like, in this part up here when I like put the buckle on and everything, I was afraid it was gonna like tear or something. It just felt so thin and cheap, but obviously that's not a super huge problem. Most people change these straps out anyway. So, you know, let's take a look at the back, I guess, because this one is, check out that serial number. And these are also numbered limited editions, and there's my number. I cannot believe I got this number. Number 0001 out of 1,000. That was just pure luck. I actually bought this from a gray market dealer on eBay. There was only 2 ways to get this. One of them is from a website called Mass Drop that released like a group buy of these. And the other way was through some kind of gray market dealer on eBay or something. So anyway, now I'm gonna do couple more things here. Here's a size comparison. So on the left, we have an Oris Diver 65. That's kind of my go-to watch for quite a while now. I find it to be pretty nice, although it's kind of an acquired taste. That style's not for everyone. And then we have here the Glycine Airman. So it's a much smaller watch. The Oris is 40 millimeters in diameter, and this is 36. And you can see the dial is much smaller and much more crowded looking. So this is what I'm used to. And then there's this with a bunch of more hands and numerals on the dial and everything. So you can kind of see where I'm coming from for being confused about, you know, seeing the time at a glance on it. But like I said, that's just me. That's just what I'm used to. Now this also comes with, let me zoom out, a very attractive box here. It comes in this wood box with Glycine branding on the inside and everything. It's a cool box, but just thought that some people might, you know, enjoy seeing that. So now, last thing I'll do for you is I will give it a wrist shot for everyone, so you can see kind of how it looks. Now I've got about a 7-inch wrist. So this is about what it looks like on a person's wrist. So we'll zoom out so you can get a better idea of how it looks. So it's an attractive watch. It's not too thick. It'll definitely, you know, fit under your shirt cuff if you want to wear it with a, you know, dress shirt or something. And why not? So yeah. There you go, the Glycine Airman No. 1. Not the one that was released in 2014, but the one that was released in 2018, because there's now 2 kinds of No. 1s, that's right. They're both called No. 1. Alright, well, this has been time for a new watch. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. And leave a comment if I got anything wrong. I'm sure I did. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing glycine correctly. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.